Hi and welcome. My name is Maria Laumark and I'm here to tell you a bit about Danish theatre culture and introduce you to a couple of exercises or techniques that you can apply yourself in your own rehearsal process if you wish to have a bit of more of a Danish approach, or maybe if you're working on Danish script, who knows, or if you're just curious about what Danish theatre is. Anyway, I'm currently sat very far out in the countryside in Denmark during these lockdown times, and it's very windy and rainy today. Classic Denmark weather, so if you can hear any rumbling in the background, that's why. But yeah, I'm a Danish actor and theatre maker, but I'm actually based in London, and I've been in the UK for about 3 years now. I had a year in Newcastle, funny enough, and then I've been in London for the last couple of years, because I'm training at the 2-year rep at Fourth Monkey Acting Training Company, where I will hopefully be graduating this year. And I was a part of the new Nordics Festival, where I was assisting Jack Nurse on the Icelandic text Refuge. I've always had my roots in devising, but I haven't necessarily gone the classic Danish way, so to speak. I started acting from a really young age, and then I went to like a youth talent program, like NYT, and when I graduated from that, I actually went into working in children and youth theatre, and I started focusing more on writing and new writing, and so trained more as a playwright in that sense. And then I went back into acting again when I founded my own company, CHACMA Performance, which did much more like fringy, experimental, physical theatre stuff, and we toured for a couple of years, both in Denmark and internationally as well. And I guess there's something about these international collaborations that I personally have always had a really big passion for, and did a really cool playwright international project with called Writers Lab, which was a collaboration between Theatre Catapult in Denmark and Live Theatre in Newcastle. And I got to work with a really cool writer, a Danish writer called Anna Bro, who you should definitely check out. Foreign Affairs, who is a theatre company that's also been a bit involved here in the new Nordics Festival, did a production of her show The Warm House last year, I think. So that's definitely translated to English. So check her out. She's doing some brilliant, she's a brilliant example of some really good Danish theatre. As you might know, we have a really good welfare system in Denmark, and we have some really good strong unions as well, and in general there's a big trust in each other and in the government, and I guess all these things that makes that there's a really good security net and safety net, and there's a system that catches you if you fall, and also means we have a really high quality of life, and our middle class is really, really broad, so we don't really think of class in the same way as you do in the UK. And I guess all of this obviously is a really privileged position to come from, but it all feeds into the theatre culture in several ways. And I think if you look at it from a more practical point of view, we have a much longer rehearsal process, but much shorter days. So obviously this can vary, but normally you would have a 4-hour rehearsal day, but then you would have an 8-week rehearsal period. And that is also to do with the fact that you want the actors to be able to have a really a family life. And because ensemble is quite a big thing in Denmark, most larger venues would have their own ensemble, it means that if the actors are in rehearsal during the day and maybe have a performance in the evening, they have those hours in the middle of the day where they can go and pick their children up from school, spend time with their partner, and where if you look at it from a more, I guess, emotional point of view, I guess because there's not that same worry or struggle of survival, it means that we kind of go to these more dark, obscure places in our stories then in the theatre. And I think some of it is also, or at least that's a bit of a joke, but I think it's quite true that we're quite affected by the horrible weather we have here in Denmark, and that is so dark all the time during the year. I think if you look, for example, at some of the popular crime, criminal series, The Killing on the Bridge, it's kind of that thing of okay, because everything is so good here, we're the happiest country, second happiest to Finland now. Let's not go into that. But yeah, it's sort of that thing of like, oh, what could be like the worst thing we could imagine happening, or like what could be really horrible. Like we have to like live out some of this like darkness through our stories. Dig. Oh, and it's also quite interesting because some of it I think also cut that child. Another thing that is probably also a factor in this is that we have a big cultural legacy in like our fairy tales and myths, which also tends to be quite dark and obscure and horrible. But like we don't have, like the same way as the UK, you have Shakespeare, we don't have like a big Danish playwright, but we have H.C. Andersen. So like in schools you don't really read like scripts really. But you would learn about fairy tales and like read H.C. Andersen from a young age. And I think that affects the theatre culture a bit, that like the playwright is often forgotten. Like not many people would be able to mention any Danish playwrights, but they would definitely be able to mention directors and actors. And I guess that also gives like sometimes the director a bit of a higher status in a way, where I remember a British director telling me that he said that if the writer was in the room, he knew that the writer definitely had the higher status than him. But yeah, status is actually an interesting thing if you compare the two countries, because I think we in Denmark have a much more like flat or horizontal hierarchy. And there's a much more like a sense of everyone is equal collaborators, and there's a sort of more directness, where I think it was Sophia Hagen, who's a Danish comedian, London-based, that I saw in Edinburgh last year, who made a brilliant point about if you in the UK need to like ask someone for something, you would have to like go through 5 different people, and like there's sort of all these like steps, where in Denmark you would just email that person and just be like boom. And we have a good saying in Danish called fisken på disken, which means put the fish on the counter. And it's sort of like that thing of like just cut the crap, just like boom, say it as it is. And I think in quite a brilliant sense that really describes both Danish culture but also Danish theatre culture. But I'll come back to that later. The last thing I'll mention is that Denmark is obviously quite a small country, both in terms of geographically but also in terms of population, and I don't think that like you can't help that affecting the theatre. So like most shows would have a much shorter life than in the UK and would only be put on like one venue and then maybe go on a tour. But it also means that we are one of the Nordic countries that produces the most work. And yeah, there's lots of venues that has nothing to do with a small country, but I'll just mention this anyway, that like lots of venues are state funded, and we have lots of like artist grants. That means that the artist, often a writer, not always, but would just get like paid to do their own work for like a year. Yeah, and we have quite a big focus on new writing, and we have a lot of great female writers at the moment, so that's really good. But anyway, back to in terms of like small country, it also means that we only have like really have one like main or like approved performing arts school, which is called the Danish National School of Performing Arts, and they only take like 2 playwrights every year and 2 directors, and they don't have like 3 schools of 3 departments, I guess, so they take like 6 or 7 actors each, so it's like around 20 actors every year, etc. etc. So it's obviously quite a small pool of creatives that actually get an education every year, compared to the UK. But I think that's quite a main difference still, that there's only like this one main school that like feeds the creatives. So if you look at Danish theatre, it tends to be very, very political and like playing with or like pushing boundaries, and in that sense very much like almost in your face, or again fisken på disken. But yeah, and then as mentioned, it's very dark and obscure, and in that sense looking a bit more towards German theatre, like getting inspiration from there. And I think it was Anna who actually said something really brilliant, where in the UK it can tend to be more like, what can you say, the construction of the story more like elegant or like clever in the sense of like the character secrets like slowly unravels, where in Denmark the actor would come in scene one and just like scream their secret, and then we go from there. But that doesn't mean like there's still very much a poetic language within the theatre. Yeah, I think Denmark, a really, really key thing is the space and the designs and visuals, like playing with like concept and images, where the acting is quite, or tends to be very underplayed, and like it's not like the actors are putting on a character, and that's it, obviously they are, but like it's more, yeah, much more like a version of them, or yeah, just very underplayed. And then the staging definitely contrasts that with being much more like big and expressionistic, and yeah, and I guess that's one of the key differences as well between like when you see the TV crime dramas and then to what the theatre is. The actors are also trained in this, like they're trained to play with the space and with the design, and are seen a lot as like again equal collaborators. And because we don't have such a long rehearsal process, you don't have time to actually go in and explore the space, explore the design. So yeah, I guess it becomes quite a key player. And I guess No Planet B, which was the Danish text in the new Nordics Festival, is quite a good example of all of this actually, because it was made in collaboration with the actors, like using lots of improvisation, and the actors are called their own name in the show. And again, it's very, like the design and the visuals is such a key element, and is so like, yeah, again, way big and obscure in a sense, where again the acting is much more like they are having this lecture and then all of this world unravels. And yeah, it's obviously very, very political. If you don't know anything about it, it's about the climate crisis. So yeah, it's very political, very direct, very much in that sense in your face, or just again, fisken på disken. So the first exercise I have for you is called Watershed. Why it's called that, I don't know, but I learned it from a colleague of mine, and yeah, have been doing it in lots of different settings. And it really plays with the sense of the actors, the collaborator, space, or like the design, and yeah, it's a devising exercise in terms of generating material. And I'm sure you can do this on Zoom as well if you're currently doing Zoom rehearsals. But yes, here it is. So you can do this either focused on a specific theme, like when I developed a show with my company called Robust, we were doing this all robust themed. But I've done it at like devising masterclasses as well, where I've just asked people to like bring something that moves them or provokes them or makes them wonder. So like you can theme it in or frame it in whichever way is useful for the process you are in. But basically everyone who's in the room brings in some objects and some texts. This can be like newspapers, books, poetry, something you've written yourself, or something you printed out from social media or whatever. But all these objects and texts goes in like a pile in the middle, and then has to be done in groups of 3. So yeah, you make if you're more than 3 in the room, you can like make several piles. But yeah, so you're in a group of 3, and there's one person who's talking, one person who's writing or like drawing, illustrating, whichever one you fancy, and one person who's moving. And basically you take your starting point from the pile, and you, again, if you're the person talking, you can either read some of the stuff that's there, you can just talk about what you're seeing, and the same for the other people. But like the aim is for it to come to a point where it's just like that sort of stream of consciousness flow, and you are all responding to each other. So you can also, as the person moving, you can move towards from like what the person is saying, or from what you feel from this object, etc., etc. So it's all up to you, but like that sense of like everyone responding to everyone and the things in the pile. And then the thing is that you then rotate, so everyone gets to do everything. And you can do this as you wish. You can either be like just the person saying switch, Or you can have, I normally do it with a timer, and like if you want like the quick flow, you can do like maybe 2 minutes, and then you just keep rotating to the different what can you say, stations. Or you can do it like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I would recommend more like around 5 minutes max, so there comes that sort of flow. I'm just going to take a brief moment to talk a bit about some different Danish theatre, some Danish directors or writers that I think is quite significant for Danish theatre. And I think the first one to mention is Elisa Kragerup, who's a really brilliant Danish director. I've just watched what can you say, the online, the streaming version of her Romeo and Juliet at the Royal National Theatre. That was on in 2015, 16. But yeah, again, it's just, if like, you can go into the website and watch it if you want. Like, it's in Danish, but if you know Romeo and Juliet by heart, like, watch it. Yeah, it's really good. And again, the whole set design of it is brilliant. And like the way she again worked with the actors in the beginning to like improvise a lot and explore the spatial relationship. Yeah, explore the design. And I think I'm normally not sorry about this, but a big Shakespeare fan. But like I was in tears. It was beautiful. And again, it really shows this again her way of working, like the ensemble, like everyone is on the stage all the time, the community of it. Yeah, and she often collaborates with a Danish writer called Line Knudsen, who I think again she's a brilliant Danish writer to look at as well. Yeah, speaking of this like very political pushing the boundaries, there was a show on a couple of years ago called Rocky by Tue Bering. It's the story of this boxer who is a loser, but and then on the stage there's a dead pig, and it's very much speaking to like the cultural elite, and like he's getting the audience on board with him, and then it just like unravels, and he ends up, like, spoiler alert, but like cutting this pig up and like crawling into it, and like it's yeah, playing with the designs, huh? So another playwright, Danish playwright and artistic director at a theatre called Sort-Hvid, which means black-white, is Christian Lollige, and he's definitely doing a lot of very political stuff, very much pushing the boundaries. He did a show called Manifesto, which was about the terror incident in Norway with Breivik, and it created lots of debate because it was obviously still very close to the time. Yeah, he did. I mean, he's done plenty of stuff. Like, check him out. He's really pushing stuff. Like, he did, speaking of, like, in terms of how you use design, a show called Hospital, which I didn't see, but I heard a lot about different kind of body fluents, or like, yeah, coming very much out on the audience. And he, yeah, but then he also did a version of Erasmus Montanus, which is obviously one of Holberg's, which is probably the closest we come to, like, what can you say, famous Danish playwright of, like, what can you say, yeah, old cultural legacy. But yeah, he did a version of Erasmus Montanus, which was like praised and like kept coming back. So but yeah, he's a very good example of someone who's really pushing the political correctness. Okay, so the second exercise I got for you, I actually don't have a name for, but I've chosen now to call it Look What I Got. And again, it's very much playing with like the spatial relationship to space and the characters' relationship to each other. And you can do this in character with objects from your show, or I tend to also just do it like just to create like a one-time image where nothing is planned, or where it's not, what can you say, supposed to be anything from the beginning. Like a kind of like that thing of like what it creates. Anyway, this will make much more sense when I actually describe the exercise. So you're three people in space. So you would be one person sitting on a chair, whichever way you like, one person on the floor, again sitting or lying in whichever way you like, and one person standing. And I normally have like a director or a curator deciding this. So it would be like, oh, Maria, go stand over there. And then everyone has, again, a specific point of where they are looking. So maybe I would be told to sit like this, and I would have to look over there. And that's like, then I have to keep sitting like this and looking there throughout the whole exercise. And just have like quite a neutral expression in your face. Or again, like obviously play with this as you like. I normally tend to like, no facial expression really. And then all the three actors on the space, they would all each have an item, whichever item. But it's quite fun if no one else but the person who has the item sees what it is. So again, you have a big pile of different objects, and I might have chosen this pen for some reason, and I hide it behind my bag. And again, the curator has told everyone where to sit and stand. And then once the music starts, and again, it's quite fun to play with lots of different kind of music in terms of the atmosphere. When the music starts, all the actors in the space has to do is just to show the item and take it behind their back. Now, see, this sounds really simple and boring, but it's not, because you can show the item in whichever way you like. So like you can wait ages till you show it, or you can do it like quick or slow, and you can do it as many times as you want. But what's then really fascinating is, again, the images it creates depending on how the people are compared to each other in the space. Because you just can't help but it to like create some stories. I did a really, really excellent one a few years ago, where there was a girl sitting on the floor, and her item was like a little teddy bear, and then there was like a woman who was like a bit older than her sitting on the chair, and there was something about like the girl on the floor was looking away, so she couldn't see the woman, and the woman was actually also not looking at her, but her item was like a plastic gun, like obviously just that toy gun, but like, so when she was taking that out and like moving it, it was sort of pointing towards the girl that was sitting there with the little teddy toy, and it just created this really obscure image of like kind of Medea in a sense, and it was all just a coincidence, but just playing with those key elements of like where you are in the space compared to each other, where you're looking, and this object you have in your hand that you're showing. You're not doing anything else but showing it, still looking in the same direction. So yeah, that was exercise number 2. I guess it's a bit difficult for me to say what is particularly Nordic about me or the way I'm working, especially now with also having trained in the UK. I guess it's sort of a bit of a mix of everything, but I asked Jack, who I was assisting, what he thought it brought to the rehearsal process of Nordicness, and he said that I went into the rehearsal process with like very much an openness, a curiosity, and very much a focus on how the text was speaking to the wider world, like asking from day one, like, why are we doing this text now? What is it saying? And I guess that's sort of that political aspect that comes into it, like, why this, why now, what are we saying? And yeah, then I always have my eyes a lot on like what the visual images are saying. But I guess that also comes a bit from like, again, fourth monkey background. But yeah, a really interesting conversation that happened during rehearsal that I just want to share with you is in Refuge, the character's talking about this Chinese man. He's making, it's all in his mind, but he's talking, and it's very much that thing of like making assumptions about people on the other side of the earth, and it comes across quite racist, but lots of it also comes from like an ignorance rather than an intentional racism, if that makes sense. Not that it excuses it, it's just to explain. But yeah, we ended up changing that to the deodorant man, and those conversations were to me really fascinating, because I'm not sure, obviously can't say for sure, but like I don't think that would have happened in Denmark. I think you would have kept the script as it is with saying the Chinese man. So that was quite interesting for me as a Dane, being like, okay, well now it might be a Nordic text, but this is to a British audience, so how do we need to adapt to actually, because the UK is much more multicultural, there needs to be a different kind of sensitivity in terms of your political correctness. And that doesn't mean that it's right to not be political correct in Denmark or anything like that. It's just, yeah, I guess it's just interesting being like, okay, well, what is our audience now? How do we need to be sensitive here? Yeah, so that was for me quite fascinating in terms of culture clashes. Yeah, but then otherwise I thought just the whole New Nordic experience was just everyone felt very much as equal collaborators. There was very much like a flat horizontal hierarchy. And I guess that would also be some of the things I would say that the UK can really learn from the Danish theatre culture. Yeah, and as well, of course, as the excellent working hours. I mean, definitely looking back now, being like, oh, that's quite good, Denmark, well done. So yeah, longer rehearsal time, shorter days, could definitely be great to have in the UK. Or anywhere in the world for that matter. But yeah, other than that, like, if you want to do it more Danish, then play with the darkness, play with the design, the visuals, and don't be afraid to be direct and just put the fish on the counter. Fisken på disken. Yeah, thank you for listening to this. I hope it gave you some kind of impression of what Danish theatre culture can be like. And also, if you're interested in either reading or doing any Danish texts or Nordics in general, then contact Cut the Cord, because they have a really, really big database now. And again, because you don't have to go through all these different layers asking 5 people, they can very easily put you in contact with the right people. So yeah, stay safe and stay well, and hopefully see you on the other side of the lockdown.